Good. Well, we're going to reference the recreation or the end of the story. You guys think the end of the story is important? How the story ends, maybe, slightly. Yeah. Anyone know why? Why is the end of the story important?
Because everything is built up to that.
Yeah.
Everything all.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's like the conclusion. I mean, everything is pointless if the end of the story goes south, right?
I don't like movies that end correctly.
Yeah.
Like, it was so wonderful until the end.
Are they
Wasted
like
like
making
that.
you decide how
Yeah.
it ends? Tell me how it ends.
Exactly. Yes. And I think, like, when we were just talking about the church week, and I could summarize, like, in a sentence when I'm like, discipleship is laying down your life by imitation. So I had a picture of the whole week in a sentence. And I'm going to try to do that for the recreation week here. And I'm going to do more of a teaching here, mainly for you guys. And I do some version of this in my actual SFL. So I want you to think about the last time that you sinned. Okay, the last time you had a fairly epic-sized sin, like you lost your temper, you ate more than you should, you looked at pornography, outburst of anger, spent more money than you should, scrolled online, wasting time, whatever it is, hurt someone's feelings by sharp words. Try to picture that in your head when you do that. What was the problem when that happened? What happened? What happened? I'm not asking for you to tell me the details of what you did. I'm going, what happened at that moment? What caused you to do that? Desire to control. Because of what? You were desiring to control something because, we're going to go pretty deep on this.
I think self has to do with self.
Things weren't going the way you wanted them to.
Things didn't go the way you wanted them to, okay? And that made you what?
Take back control.
Take back control. And why did you have to take back control?
Didn't trust.
You didn't.
Who had been in control.
You didn't trust the person who had been in control. Okay. Then, but what does that mean not to trust? Like when you say, well, I didn't trust this person to do, I didn't trust this person, what are you saying?
Can't do as well as you can.
Can't do it as well as you could, or, okay, they sort of go with that.
Hold yourself in a higher position.
We're holding ourselves in a higher position. But there's something that's even happening before that, deeper. We're not trusting. But what does it mean not to trust? If I say I don't trust God or I don't trust a person, I mean, let's make it very like...
What they're going to do will hurt you.
What they're going to do, there we go. Now, what they're going to do is not good. What this other person's not going to do is not going to be good. So that is sort of, when you think about your sin, or when we sin, is it a behavior problem or a belief problem?
Rooted in a belief problem.
Rooted in the belief problem expressed in the behavior. What's the belief problem?
God is not good.
Do you actually feel that? Do you think that? Are you self-aware enough to know when you're sin, what's actually happening? You have a belief problem, okay? And then you have what we've said, a trust problem, because this person's not good. There's one word, even to some degree, it's an expression of the future. What's future trust? What'd you say, Nate? You say,
No, you aren't.
see, the trust. If you're trusting in something in the future, faith, hope. Okay, we're going to go with hope. Hope, faith is a hard word because it's like, what does faith mean? But hope, it's easier for us to picture. I'm hoping something will happen. I'm down. Whenever I sin, I'm down at the basement of a hope problem. My problem is I've lost hope. This is so easy to see when Shelley and I argue. When we have calm, healthy arguments, the baseline of that is that I feel hopeful. I'm like, we can get through this. That's actually the base of what's happening here. When I start getting angry and we start saying mean things to each other, thank God it doesn't happen very often anymore. But when that happens, when that used to happen a lot, what was the problem? I lost my hope. I lost hope that we could work through this argument. And so now I'm going to start acting mean. One of my kids acts out, and I'm overwhelmed and I have an outburst of anger. Why do I get so, we're supposed to be frustrated. God got angry. What would make me get super angry at one of my kids, or make me just lose my mind internally? What would make me do that when they act out or misbehave?
Well, to use the hope word, I can imagine you feeling, because I'm not a father, I can imagine you feeling like the hope that you have that your kids would turn out all right.
Yes. I actually have a hope problem. That's actually the problem, is I'm like, this kid's going to be an axe murderer. I don't say those words, but you guys think I'm joking, but I'm telling you, that's what happens. When we lose our mind as parents, we have a hope problem. We are looking at our kids' behavior and we feel hopeless. And that's what makes us go crazy. Okay, so Brenda doesn't get mad at me for using too many family examples. You're at work. Okay? I'm kidding, I'm just teasing. You're at work and you have a problem at work. Okay, you get a bad review, a coworker says something mean to you in a meeting, and it just devastates you.
I had a moment like that on Facebook this week.
Sure.
A stranger said something devastating to me.
And what happened?
And it bothered me for 3 days.
For 3 days, why?
Because I was afraid that maybe the stranger doesn't know me at all, really knows me the best, and everything that I am is worthless.
Right, because that is what? Hopelessness? You literally just described to me hopelessness. All right, last week, I had 3 furnaces go down, or 2 weeks ago, I had 3 furnaces go down in my rental properties in 1 week, first cold snap. Never had something like that go on. So last week, Eric was gracious, let me go home a little early. And I was up till 1 a.m. wrestling these copper pipes on this boiler. Right? And it was really hard. And I knew the battle wasn't the physical battle, although it was an incredibly physical battle. I was teetering on this line of hope. I could feel it, like, can I get this accomplished? And that hope line was I was teetering on and barely hanging on. Well, I don't do that very often, thank God. But that's our issue, okay? And that's how we have to see this. This is why the Bible talks about faith and trust and hope. That's our problem. We have to connect it to our daily lives, or it's pointless. We have all the Bible knowledge in the world, and then it doesn't collide into our real life, and we don't understand what's happening every day where we wrestle through some of these things. This is why the end of the story, and I'm connecting the dots, the end of the story is so important. It's all about how the story ends. So you can read Revelation 21:22. We're not going to do that now. Revelation 21:22. It's all about hope, hope, hope. Shelley and I do foster care work. We see some of the messiest, terrible things you could ever imagine you see in the world. How do we do that work? How do I believe the story is going to end for a 4-year-old that's been through living hell? Where do I believe the story ends for that 4-year-old? Revelation 21:22. That's where I believe that story ends. Okay? That's hope. Right? You get cancer. Your mom dies. Right? You're wrestling with something. How do you get through those scenarios? Hope and where the story ends. That's it. That's the foundation. And frankly, the root of hope is actually remembering, which goes back to an earlier topic we talked about all the time, or in the cross week, about remember me. This is why Jesus said, when you do communion, or the Last Supper, remember. It's all about hope. We spend majority of our time trying to behavior manage ourselves. We're trying to change our behaviors when we actually need to be increasing our faith, trust, and hope. And those are totally different games to play, and it's very difficult because this is so non-quantifiable. So if you go back in that Spirit week, it said, let the Spirit guide your lives, and the behaviors were secondary. And the behaviors were the results, following the Spirit was the goal. All connected to trust, just connected to hope. I want to give you just so you know this isn't my theories, I'm going to show you in the Bible where this is in this week. And I now have the people in SFL do this exact exercise I'm going to show you right here. I want you to go to the 2 Peter verse. I want you to read the 2 Peter verse. There are 2 sentences where it talks about belief. Having the right belief leads to the right behavior. Belief first, then behavior. I want you to underline those 2 sentences that are in there that connect belief to behavior. All right, you guys find it? Someone want to read one of them?
You ought to live holy and godly lives as you look forward to the day of God and the Spirit's coming.
Yes. How do we live? Now ask the question, how do you live holy and godly lives? What's your motivation? What's your motivation for living a holy and godly life? Hope. Hope. What makes you hang on when life is very difficult? Because you know this life is temporary. I know we know these things, but we don't believe them. That's our real challenge. How do we believe this more? Thinking about scale, someone mentioned a 1 to 10 scale. How do we believe this more? Good. Awesome. So really, this is a worthy discussion. We could spend hours just talking about how does this happen? And that's when you want your midrash starts to get really rich. All right, what's the second one?
So then, dear friends, since you're looking forward to this, make every effort to be found spotless.
Yeah.
Etc., etc.
Yes. Since you have hope, since you're looking forward to, which is hope, be spotless. There's the connection to the belief that influences the behavior. Isn't that cool? The Bible. So good. All right, thoughts, questions? What's that?
I keep thinking about Rogue One.
Rogue One.
They
Yeah.
say hope all along.
Oh, they do? Oh,
Yeah.
okay. I have not seen that one.
You should.
All right, thoughts, questions, reactions?
So you link hope with remembering.
Yes.
So like you just poked at it just now, I
Okay.
think, but
Mhm.
you said mid-rash on how do we do this?
Okay. Let me give you a very specific example. I'll use the marriage one because I think it's really relevant. Or you could call it friendship. I'll use friendship or marriage as the same thing for the single people in here. You have a close friend, okay? Or you have a spouse and you have an argument. How do you get to a hopeful place? I'll just throw that out there. How do you get your place mentally to a hopeful place to deal with the issue that's at hand?
Don't start defensive.
Don't start defensive, okay?
Find some common ground.
Okay. Common ground, yeah, that sounds okay. Yeah, I would say that's good. There's a better answer. I mean, I think that's like step 2. That's down the road. What's step 1?
You could call back to mind all the times you have already worked through things.
Sit. Sit. What's that?
Remember.
Remembering, and why does that help? Now, what happens?
Because you're
Your
not
hope.
starting from ground zero
Right.
every single time.
Exactly, because you're like, oh, we've done this 20 times before. Oh, we can actually get through this. Isn't that amazing? Like that, we underestimate the power of that. That's why the first year of marriage is so challenging sometimes, because you don't have a bank of things to get through. You kind of walk through some of those things. Or if you have a good friend. I mean, I have good friends. I'd be like, okay, how do we get through this argument? Oh yeah, we've had this experience, we got through this, okay. Now I am literally calmed down, and I'm back in my rational brain versus my emotional brain. And I'm a guy, and that happens, right? So, great. So that, you see what I'm talking about that. And whatever it is, if it's work, if it's kids, wherever you're at, you start with remembering. And that's very practical in our lives. But epically, because you're going to die, epically we have to believe the big story first. We have hope in that story first, and then there's multiple applications throughout our life. Because all of our little hopes are based on that bigger hope. Good, great question. Other thoughts, reactions, questions?
You probably pointed this out when you midrash this passage, but the counter of that is the first 4 verses where it talks about the bad behaviors are because they forgot.
Yes.
Or because they lost hope.
Yes. This is a worthy question. How do you train in hope? Circle that one in your notes. How do you train in hope? That's the right question.
Is that in our notes?
No, probably not. I'm telling you to write it down and circle it.
Here's a family question.
Yes.
How do you train your kids in hope?
Big picture, that's the entire Feast of Tabernacles. So a whole week we live in a tent and we say this is not our home. So we're training in the big story in that deal. And then in our Shabbat meal or our Friday night meal, we remember every week. It's focused, a whole meal focused on remembering. Those are our 2 kind of big bookends, the weekly and the yearly rhythmic things. Yeah, but just conversations like this.
And I think, that's when you're dealing with the children, and ultimately children are just little emotional beings without developed rational brains, like Justin was saying. So I believe, and I mean, even studying it like in brain science, one of the jobs of parents is to help recall things that weren't earth-shatteringly hard, right? Because not having the jacket that I really want to wear is an earth-shattering experience for me. And though in the moment, children aren't going to necessarily, your rational retelling or remembering of goodness isn't going to in that instant necessarily bring them out, but you are training their brains to connect with like, oh, when I feel something, I can remember that life isn't always this hard, and that good things have happened, and that I do have another jacket that's just as good, and I have hope that my family, my parents, they love me, they care for me, so it's actually super practical day in, day out with kids. Like this is there aren't many parenting books that put hope and remembering as the language of what you're doing. but it's what you're doing and training children day in, day out. It's like, the world isn't ending, I promise.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. Like we just did this with our kids at we had a big festival in the summer, and we had the kids remember something they overcame. And Layla's here, and she used to really wrestle with having to be perfect. The world was going to end if she wasn't perfect. And so now she's gotten lots of practice and trials and failure. Now she's like, I'm okay not being perfect. And so we recalled that, we wrote that down, we celebrated that, because now that's something that's in her bank of overcoming. Henry, my oldest son, could not talk to adults. And we put him through sales training, and so he had to go up and down the street talking and selling his lawn mowing business. It was terrifying for him, but he did it, and now he's like, I'm not afraid of talking to adults anymore. And we're like, boom, bank. Remember this? Remembering, overcoming those things are so valuable. So bringing those things back up and telling those stories. Yes. Good questions. All right, how the rest? Emily, you look deep in thought. Are you okay?
It's good.
Okay. Right. All right, good. Make sense? You understand? So now if you have one picture in your head of where you're going on recreation, what are you going? Okay? If you have that picture, then all these verses make so much more sense. You can get lost. This is the other thing I say. You can get lost in crazy end time. Is this thing going to happen? Is it going to be premillennially? Is it going to be rapture? Stop. This is what I care about. Hope. There's a good other deeper questions, but we get into these crazy intellectual questions and we miss the most important thing about the end times, and that's hope.
I know you just gave us a 4-minute theme on the question, so it's got another one.
Okay. Yeah, no, that's fine.
When I read 2 Peter,
Mm-hmm.
and not just this passage, but in Revelation, in most of the Bible, there's also a component of absolute terror and fear.
You got it.
Do you ever bring that into the discussion?
You need two bookends in your life to survive: hope and fear. Jesus uses it all the time. Revelation's full of both. In fact, they're kind of heavy on fear, smaller on hope. But yes, a mature believer needs to know we are deeply externally motivated. We have this problem that we think we're internally motivated and we should be doing things. That's a lie. You're fallen. You're a mess. You should be a mess. You should be selfish. So God gave you this bookend of fear and this bookend of hope to keep you in. And you need both of those fuels underneath you. Some days it's hope, and some days it's fear that keeps you going, or some weird combination of those. I think absolutely. We don't hit a lot of that in SFL, but we're not doing people a favor if we just tell them the happy side of the story.
We were reading Revelation in Bible study, and we got through the 7 seals part, and right before it says that the Lamb who was slain was the only one who was found who was worth opening them. Mm-hmm. And each of the 7 seals releases even more terrible, destructive thing. And it's really cool to me to see how he and nobody else was given the right to do something so terrifying. Because somebody else would have used it for their own purposes. And so even in the fear, there's still hope.
Yes.
And I thought that was really, really cool.
Good. Well, we say Jesus or God being the executioner. That's a good example of that. Okay, Rhett, how are we doing this?